Then came the dinner. Henry called it an anniversary of the restaurant, though he dressed it up like a celebration of the Preston legacy. He insisted we host a formal evening for longtime patrons, local press, and community leaders. He said it was important to show the city that we were entering a new era. He told me to wear my pearls. Pearls, like I was a symbol, like the restaurant was a museum and I was the oldest exhibit. I remember the day of it like a film reel that won't stop. The kitchen was hot and humming. The air smelled like shallots and thyme and anxiety. Tables were dressed in linen so white it looked like a lie. Candles glowed. A musician tuned a saxophone near the bar. That soft warm sound like someone clearing their throat before confession. I arrived early, because I always arrive early. Old habits are a kind of faith. I walked through the dining room, touching chair backs, straightening a fork here, smoothing a napkin there. My hands remembered what my heart tried to deny. This place was mine. It had been built from my hours, my stubbornness, my love. Henry came in wearing a suit that fit him too well. The kind of suit you wear when you want to look like a man who cannot be questioned. Sloane followed him, dressed in a deep red that made her look like the center of every photograph. She kissed Henry's cheek in front of the staff. Not a quick friendly peck, a possessive, theatrical kiss. And Henry smiled like a boy getting away with something. The guests arrived, familiar faces. People who had watched our restaurant grow. People who had complimented my soups, my sauces, my steady presence for decades. They hugged me, told me I looked wonderful, told me how proud they were of Henry. I smiled. I played the role. I did it so well I almost convinced myself. Dinner was served in courses, each plate a small performance. The applause of cutlery against porcelain, the clink of glasses, the low murmur of money and praise. I sat near the front, where Henry insisted I should sit, as if he was placing me in a position of honor. Across the room, I could see Sloane laughing too loudly at something Henry said, her hand resting on his arm like it belonged there. My granddaughter, Henry's daughter, my little Lily, was not there. That fact mattered more than anything else. Henry said she was busy. She's 16. She's always busy. But she would have come if she'd been asked in a way that made her feel wanted. In that moment, I realized Henry had arranged the room the way he wanted the story told. Elders and patrons and press, but no child whose eyes might show what she truly saw. The toast came after dessert. Henry stood, tapped his glass, and the room quieted the way a room quiets when it expects gratitude. I watched him from my chair, my pearls cool on my throat. I remember thinking, just for a moment, maybe he'll honor me. Maybe he'll tell the truth about who held this place together. Maybe he'll say my name, like it still belongs to the future. He began with safe words: legacy, perseverance, a testament to hard work. He mentioned his father briefly, in a way that sounded practiced. He nodded toward me as if I was a painting on the wall behind him. The room applauded politely. Then his voice changed. It became softer, more intimate, the way a man's voice becomes when he's about to confess love and expects applause for it. Henry's gaze drifted away from me and landed on Sloane. She tilted her head like she was modest, like she wasn't starving for the moment. And tonight, Henry said, I want to honor someone who has brought new light to our lives. Someone who has transformed not only the way we serve, but the way I see the future. The word future hit me like a cold spoon against teeth. He lifted his glass. He smiled, and he said her name. He called her his inspiration, his partner in vision. He told the room she was the guest of honor. He said this in front of people who had known me for decades, in front of staff who had watched me bleed for that restaurant, in front of men and women who had dined at my tables and thanked me for feeding them after funerals, after births, after celebrations, after ordinary Tuesdays. The room did not erupt into cheers. It did something worse. It went silent. A silence so sharp it felt like a blade held to the throat of the moment. Someone's fork clattered. Someone cleared their throat. A woman near the window stared at her napkin like she wanted to disappear into it. I could feel every eye on me. Pity, horror, curiosity, the kind of attention that makes your skin feel too tight. Sloane smiled and lifted her glass like a queen acknowledging her court. Henry finally looked at me then, and in his eyes I saw it, plain as a receipt on a table. He expected me to sit there and take it. He expected me to shrink, to make the moment easy, to protect him from the consequences of his cruelty. I didn't move. I didn't cry. I didn't stand up and slap him the way younger women do in movies. I didn't give him the satisfaction of a scene he could later describe as mom was emotional. I let the silence work for me. I let it hang there and become what it was. Proof. And inside my chest Something settled into place with a calm I didn't recognize at first. Not peace, not forgiveness, decision. I smiled. Slowly, not warmly. Just enough. The kind of smile that says, I heard you, I understood you, and I will remember. The rest of the night passed like a dream where you can't wake up. People spoke too brightly. They avoided looking at me. They hugged me a little too gently when they left, like I might break. Rosa squeezed my shoulder in the kitchen and her eyes were wet. I patted her hand and whispered, not tonight. Because I couldn't afford to fall apart where everyone could see. Not yet. When the last guest left and the candles burned down to small pools of wax, Henry walked into the office as if nothing had happened. He poured himself a drink from the bottle we kept for special occasions, the one I'd saved for years. He leaned back in the chair that used to be mine and said, well, that went well. I stood in the doorway, my body tired, my mind razor clear. You embarrassed me, I said softly. Henry laughed. Actually laughed. Mom, don't be dramatic. It's business. It's branding. People like a story. A story, I repeated. Yes, he said, waving his hand. We're evolving. Sloane gets it. She's modern. She has contacts. She's helping me take this place to the next level. He paused. And the way he paused was deliberate. You've done so much. But it's time to let go. Let go. Like I was holding a balloon, and not the foundation of his life, in that moment. It didn't feel like betrayal by a husband. It felt worse. Husbands can leave. Husbands can be selfish. But your child knows exactly where the softest part of you lives. They have grown up inside your sacrifices. They have slept under the roof you worried over. They have eaten food you stretched out when money was thin. When they turn on you, it is intimate. It is precise. I walked out of the office without answering. I went home to my modest house, the one I'd moved into after Arthur died. Smaller than the family home, easier to maintain, filled with the things I truly loved. My cast iron pans, my recipe boxes, photographs that still smelled faintly of old albums, the quiet tick of my kitchen clock. I sat at my own table and stared at my hands. Then, I opened my laptop. I am not a modern woman. I don't post my meals. I don't curate my joy. But I know how numbers behave. I know where money hides when someone thinks you're too old to chase it. I logged into accounts Henry thought I didn't know existed. I found statements. I found patterns. I found the careful ways he had been bleeding the restaurant and calling it growth. I didn't confront him again. Confrontation is a gift you give someone when you still believe shame will change them. Henry didn't have shame. He had strategy, so I made my own. For weeks I moved through my days like a quiet ghost. I still went to the restaurant. I still greeted staff. I still tasted sauces. I still smiled at guests who told me they loved the place. Henry and Sloane mistook my calm for defeat. They mistook my silence for surrender. That's a common mistake people make with women who have survived decades. We know the difference between noise and power. At night, I built my case. I printed bank statements. I highlighted charges. I matched dates to Sloane's social media posts, vacations she bragged about, jewelry she displayed, luxury dinners she photographed from angles designed to make hunger look glamorous. I kept copies in a folder, then another folder, then another, because redundancy is security. I met with a lawyer whose office smelled like leather and sharp coffee. A woman, older than Henry, younger than me, with eyes like winter sky. She didn't gasp at my story. She didn't soothe me. She simply listened, then said, "He's been siphoning assets." "Yes," I said. "And he's banking on you not wanting to make a mess." "Yes," I said again, and I felt my spine straighten. She outlined the steps. Injunctions, freezes, forensic accounting, control of the business, she said, tapping her pen against the table. "If you're listed as majority owner and, I suspect you are, if your husband did things properly, then we can move quickly." I signed papers with a hand that did not tremble. The day we served Henry, I didn't do it at home. I didn't do it over the phone. I did it where he had tried to erase me, at the restaurant. It was lunchtime. Busy enough to have witnesses, but not so busy it would become chaos. Henry stood by the bar laughing at something Sloane said, his hand brushing her waist like it belonged there. The staff moved around them carefully. The way you move around a spill you haven't cleaned yet. The process server walked in wearing a plain suit. Calm as a man delivering weather. They think because you have silver in your hair, and a softness in your hands, you must be soft everywhere. They think age is a dimmer switch. That if they lower your light in public, you'll accept the shadow and call it peace. I used to think that too. Once, I used to think love could outlast anything if you kept feeding it. Like a stove you never let go cold. I fed it with forgiveness. I fed it with long hours. I fed it with the quiet kind of devotion no one photographs. And then, on a night that was supposed to be a celebration of everything I'd built, my own son stood in a room full of people and tried to turn me into a decorative antique, something you keep for the story, not for the future. Even now, when I close my eyes, I can still taste the air in that dining room. Butter, wine, citrus, the burn of seared pepper on steak, and underneath it all, the metallic temps that rises in your mouth when your body senses danger before your mind can name it. That taste is the same whether you're 7 years old and lost in a store, or 77 and watching your child sharpen a knife with your name on it. I'm Clara Preston. I'm 76 years old, and these days I live in a room with beige walls and a window that looks out over a parking lot and a stubborn strip of grass, where dandelions keep blooming like they don't know the rules. The nurses here call me sweetheart, even when they're the ones moving too fast. There's a cart that rattles down the hall every afternoon with cups of applesauce and pills sorted into little plastic bubbles. There are women in the common room who knit without looking, as if their fingers are the last part of them still planning something. There's a man who sings old hymns off-key in the morning, and nobody tells him to stop because that would be cruel, and also because, sometimes, we need to hear someone insist on a melody in my drawer, beneath my socks and the lavender sachet my granddaughter sent me before everything changed. I keep a folded napkin. It's thick linen, the kind restaurants use when they want you to believe the meal is an event. On that napkin is a small smear of red wine and a line of handwriting, so neat it could be printed. My handwriting. 3 words. Not poetry. Not prayer. A reminder. Save every receipt. I didn't always live like this, measured out in visiting hours and blood pressure readings and small pleasures. I had a life that smelled like garlic and rosemary and hot bread. I had a life that had a front door with a bell on it, and the bell rang all day long. And every ring meant someone wanted something we could give them. The restaurant wasn't just a business. It was the way our family learned to speak to the world. We began with a narrow storefront that had cracked tile and a ceiling fan that wobbled like it might take off and never come back. I was young enough then to stand for 14 hours and still come home and scrub my hands until the onions finally let go of my skin. My husband, God rest him, because I don't know what else to do with him in my memory now, had a laugh that could sell a bowl of soup to a man who didn't like soup. Arthur could charm steam from a kettle. He was the face, the stories, the handshakes. He wore confidence the way some men wear cologne too much, and everyone around him has to breathe it. I was the bones, the ledger, the stubborn spine that held it all up when the romance wore off and it became work. I learned early that dreams are expensive. Dreams charge interest. We took out loans that made my stomach burn when I signed the papers. We bet our house on the idea that people would pay good money to feel cared for on a plate. I cooked. I hired. I fired. I paid bills. I negotiated with purveyors who thought a woman wouldn't know the difference between a fair price and a flattering smile. I knew. I always knew. Our son Henry grew up in the back of that restaurant. He did homework at the corner table by the window. He ate French fries out of the basket before they hit the dining room. He learned to walk between servers without getting clipped by a tray. He learned the language of urgency behind hot corner before he learned how to drive. On his 15th birthday, he told me he wanted to take it over someday, like the restaurant was a crown and not a furnace. I remember looking at his young face, shiny with hope, and feeling a pride so fierce it hurt. You want your child to want something. You just don't expect them to want it the way a buyer wants a house, measuring and calculating, already imagining what to repaint. Arthur died before Henry could become the man he thought he was. A heart attack, sudden as a slammed door. One day he was tasting a sauce, complaining it needed more acid, and the next he was gone, leaving a jacket still hanging behind the office door and a half-finished list of wine specials on his desk. People sent flowers. People broadcast. People said, "At least you have the restaurant." As if grief could be balanced by inventory. At the funeral, Henry held my hand and promised me we'd keep it going together. He said it with tears in his eyes. "We'll protect it," he said. "We'll protect you." I believed him because mothers are trained to believe their children's vows. We hear what we want to hear. We fill in the gaps with love. For a while, it worked. Henry was in his 40s then, old enough to be responsible, young enough to be ambitious. And ambition is a hunger that doesn't always know the difference between food and flesh. He learned the modern world fast. Online reservations, marketing, brand identity. He spoke those words like they were magic spells that would keep us safe. He convinced me to step back from the floor. "You've earned rest," he said. "Let me handle the front." He said it like a gift. but a gift can be a wrapper around a theft. I stayed involved. Of course. I still did the books. I still watched the numbers the way a gardener watches weather. I still knew which nights were profitable and which nights were just pretty. I still recognized the sound of a lie in a spreadsheet. The way certain expenses get mislabeled when someone hopes you'll stop asking. But I was tired, and I wanted to believe my son was becoming what he promised. Then the new girl arrived. Not a girl, of course. A woman in her late 20s, with hair that looked professionally manufactured and a smile that never reached her eyes. Her name was Sloane. It sounded like a brand. It sounded like a door you needed the right code to open. Henry introduced her to me in the kitchen like he was presenting a prize. "Mom, this is Sloane. She's going to help us with guest experience and special events." Special events. Those words are a suitcase. They can hold anything. Sloane's resume was light as tissue paper. A few months here, a few months there, hosting jobs, client relations, vague titles that meant she'd been paid for being charming. Henry insisted she had connections. Connections to whom? I wanted to ask. To money. To people who talk loudly about money. He said she understood the upscale crowd. I looked at her hands' perfect nails. No burns. No calluses, and I knew she had never carried a stock pot of soup across a kitchen. She had never stayed after closing to mop when the dishwasher called out. She had never cried in the walk-in cooler because the numbers didn't work and you still had to make payroll. But Henry glowed when she laughed. That's how I knew. That glow. It's the look of a man watching someone admire him. It's addictive. It makes men reckless. Soon. Sloane was everywhere. She floated through the dining room like she owned it. She leaned into Henry when she spoke, close enough that if you were watching, you'd notice. And if you weren't watching, you'd still feel it. She suggested new cocktail menus with names that sounded like jokes you weren't invited to understand. She told me our floral arrangements looked a little dated. She said our signature dessert needed a modern twist. Modern twist. Fresh. That's the vocabulary of people who want to replace your history with their taste. And Henry, my son, my blood began to talk to me the way executives talk to older employees they plan to phase out. He said things like, "I hear you, Mom, but we have to evolve, and let's not get stuck in the past." And the cruelest one said with a smile as if he was being kind, "Are you sure you're remembering that correctly? That's how it starts. You know, not with shouting." With small erasures, the money began to move strangely. It took my eyes a while to adjust, like stepping from sunlight into a dim room. Expenses tagged as VIP outreach, brand, partnership, client cultivation. The amounts were always just under the threshold that would require my signature. Clever. The charges showed up at places I didn't recognize. High-end boutiques, a hotel spa, a jewelry store that specialized in things no one needs but many people want. Cash withdrawals with notes like vendor payment. Which vendor? I'd ask. Henry would wave me off. Handled, he'd say, and his eyes would already be sliding away. I didn't want to accuse him. I didn't want to imagine my son stealing from me the way a stranger might, so I did what women like me do. I watched. I waited. I collected facts the way a mason collects bricks, one at a time, until you have enough to build a wall that won't fall. The staff noticed before I said anything. They always do. A restaurant is a living creature. It feels what happens in its bones. Old Rosa, who'd been with me since the early years, started looking at me with a softness in her face that made my throat hurt. The younger servers started glancing away when Sloane brushed past Henry. The cooks went quieter. Even the dishwashers, who usually sing and argue and laugh like they're immune to the dining room drama, began to move with an uneasy tension. I began to feel like a portrait hanging in the hallway of my own life. Henry's smile fell apart as he read the first page. Sloane leaned over his shoulder, her lipstick bright, her eyes narrowing. "What is that?" she snapped. Henry's face went pale. His mouth opened and closed like he'd forgotten how air works. I watched from the doorway of the kitchen. My hands folded in front of me like I was waiting for a roast to finish. Rosa stood beside me. She didn't speak. Her presence felt like a hand on my back. Sloane's voice rose, sharp and frantic. "You're letting her do this? Henry, tell me you're not letting her." He jerked away from her like she was suddenly dangerous, which she was. People like Sloane don't love men, they love access. And access was being shut. Henry stormed toward the office. He threw open the door like he expected me to be there crying. I wasn't. I had already left through the back and gone to my sister's house, where the curtains smell like laundry soap and the kitchen smells like safety. I sat at her table and drank tea I barely tasted while my phone filled with Henry's messages. At first, They were furious. "What are you doing? You can't do this. This is insane." Then they became manipulative. "Mom, let's talk Sloanes. Not what you think. You're overreacting." Then, finally, they became desperate. "Please, please don't destroy everything." It would have been almost funny if it hadn't been my child. If it hadn't been the boy I once held on my hip while I stirred soup. The boy who used to press his face into my apron and say, "You smell good." Court is a slow grinder. It takes your pain and turns it into paperwork. It asks you to repeat humiliations in rooms with fluorescent lights. It forces you to translate grief into dates, amounts, signatures. But I had done my homework. And Henry, for all his modern vision, had been sloppy in the way arrogant people are sloppy. He believed his charm would cover his tracks. He believed my love would keep me quiet. The forensic accountant's report was the nail in the door. It showed dissipation of assets, personal expenses disguised as business development, payments that benefited Sloane directly, a car lease under a company line, jewelry, resorts, restaurant funds poured like champagne into someone else's glass. Henry's attorney tried to paint me as confused. He used words like elderly and emotional, like they were medical diagnoses. He suggested I'd misunderstood, that I'd grown paranoid, that I was jealous of new energy. My lawyer asked me one question after another, calm and steady, and I answered with facts, dates, amounts, names. A life of managing books made me fluent in truth. When Henry took the stand, I watched him from across the room. He looked smaller there, without the restaurant around him, like a stage set. He tried to be charming. It didn't work. Charm is useless against documents. He tried to be indignant. Indignation looks childish when you're caught stealing. He tried to be wounded. The judge's eyes didn't soften. Sloane was called too. She arrived, dressed expensively. As if clothes could intimidate the law. She smiled at the wrong times. She couldn't explain her job responsibilities with any real substance. She used phrases like brand elevation and curated experience when asked why she needed spa charges on a business card. The judge stared at her like she was a bug under glass. In the end, the ruling was what I had prayed for without daring to say out loud. I retained control of the restaurant. Full operational authority. Henry was removed from management. His access to accounts cut. A portion of his ownership interest restructured and reduced based on the proven losses he caused. And the rest tied up in a way that meant he couldn't sell it out from under me. And Sloane was terminated with a letter so clean and final it felt like a door closing on a draft that had chilled the whole place. I should tell you, I didn't feel joy when I won. I felt breathing. There's a difference. Joy is fireworks. Breathing is survival. When I walked back into the restaurant after the ruling, the air felt different. The staff stood a little straighter. The kitchen sounded like itself again. Knives on boards, pans, singing, voices calling orders like a heartbeat. Rosa hugged me and cried into my shoulder. I held her, the way I held my son when he was small. For a moment, I thought, this is what family should be. People who show up. People who do the work. Henry didn't come back with apologies. Not real ones. He sent messages that tried to blame everyone but himself. He said I'd overstepped. He said I'd humiliated him. The irony would have been delicious if it hadn't been tragic. He didn't once ask how I was. He didn't once say, "I'm sorry I hurt you." He asked only about money, about control, about what he was owed. That's when the second part of my revenge happened, the quieter part, the one no one sees from the dining room. I changed my will, not out of spite, out of clarity. People confuse the two, especially when an older woman stops giving. They call it bitterness because they don't know what else to call a woman choosing herself after a lifetime of being used. I have a granddaughter, Lily. She is Henry's child, and she has my eyes. The ones that watch. Lily came to see me after everything blew up. She sat across from me at my kitchen table. Her fingers wrapped around a mug of cocoa like she was holding warmth against the world. She didn't defend her father. She didn't attack him either. She simply looked at me and said, "I'm sorry," with a sincerity that made my chest ache. I asked her one question. "Did you know?" She hesitated, then nodded once. I tried to tell him to stop. She whispered. He wouldn't listen. That was the moment I knew Lily had a spine. A real one. Not the kind you perform. The kind you live with. I set up a trust for her. Quietly, legally, without fanfare. Education, housing. A foundation that could not be siphoned into anyone's midlife fantasy. I also set aside funds for the staff who had given me decades. The ones who had stayed when the restaurant was a gamble, and when Henry made it a battlefield. Retirement bonuses, health coverage, Small protections that would matter when their bodies grew tired the way mine has. And for Henry. Henry got what he asked for when he toasted another woman over me. He got distance. He got the consequences of his choices. He got a future where my love no longer functioned like an insurance policy. Time kept moving, as it always does. The restaurant stabilized. It even flourished, in a quieter way. We brought back old dishes, the ones people had stopped ordering because Henry insisted they were dated. We honored the regulars instead of chasing imaginary VIPs. We stopped trying to impress people who would never be loyal. We served food like it meant something again. And then my body did what bodies do. One winter morning, I slipped on ice outside my back steps and cracked my hip. It wasn't dramatic. No one was there to catch me. The cold burned my palms as I lay there staring at my own breath rising like smoke. In the ambulance, I thought, absurdly, about how I'd always feared falling in a different way, falling from importance, falling out of someone's love. And here I was, falling in the most literal sense, brought down by a thin sheet of ice. That's how I ended up here, in this nursing home, learning to walk again in a hallway that smells like antiseptic and mashed potatoes. The restaurant runs without me most days now. Rosa sends me photos. The staff visits sometimes, bringing me soup in thermoses and gossip in warm, generous handfuls. Lily comes often. She sits with me and tells me about school, about her plans, about the way the world feels to a young woman who is learning that love and betrayal can share the same last name. Henry came once, just once. He stood in my doorway like a stranger waiting to be invited inside. His hair had a new line of gray at the temples. His eyes looked tired, but not with regret, more like someone exhausted by not getting what he wanted. "I didn't think you'd really do it," he said, and his voice held a child's bewilderment, as if consequences were unfair. I sat in my chair by the window, my blanket across my knees, the afternoon light making patterns on the floor. I didn't ask him how he was. I didn't offer him tea. I didn't perform motherhood for him anymore. "You did it first," I said, quietly. He frowned. "What? You made the first cut," I said. "You just did it with a smile and called it progress." His mouth tightened. "I was trying to build something. You don't understand business today." I looked at him for a long moment, really looked. I saw the boy he used to be layered beneath the man he had become, like an old photo beneath a new one, and I felt something soft pass through me. Not forgiveness, not hatred, something like grief settling into its final shape. "I understand hunger," I said. "I just don't worship it." He shifted on his feet. "Sloan was a mistake." "It wasn't Sloan," I said. "It was you choosing to make me small so you could feel big." He flinched as if the truth had weight. For a moment, I thought he might cry. He didn't. He glanced away, toward the hallway, toward the cart of pills, toward the woman down the hall calling for her son who never comes. He swallowed. "I'm your son," he said finally, like it was a password. "And I'm your mother," I said. "And you still found it easy to humiliate me." He left without saying goodbye. The door clicked shut with a clean, ordinary sound. I sat there and listened to it echo, and I realized I didn't feel the old panic. The panic of, what if this is the last time? What if he never comes back? If he never comes back, it will be his choice again, and I will not chase. That's what old age teaches you, if you let it. It teaches you that chasing love is a young person's sport. The knees give out, the heart gets tired. If he never comes back, it will be his choice again, and I will not chase. That's what old age teaches you, if you let it. It teaches you that chasing love is a young person's sport. The knees give out, the heart gets tired, and eventually you learn the holy art of letting people walk away without handing them your dignity as a parting gift. Sometimes at night, when the nursing home quiets and the hallway lights turn everything the color of bone, I think about the restaurant like it's a living thing, still breathing somewhere out there. I imagine the heat of the ovens, the clatter of plates, the way laughter rises in a room when people feel safe. I imagine Rosa's hands moving fast. Sure, I imagine Lily stepping into her own life with the steadiness I prayed for in my child and received instead in my grandchild. I think about Henry too. I'd be lying if I said I didn't. Mothers don't stop loving. We just stop bleeding. I wonder if he ever walks past a restaurant window and sees an older woman sitting with her family and feels something twist inside him. I wonder if he misses me as a person or only misses the shape I once filled in his life, useful, forgiving, always there. And then I remember the night of the toast, the silence, the way the room held its breath, the way my pearls felt like ice, the way my son lifted his glass to someone who had not earned the history in the walls. In that memory, I no longer feel humiliated. I feel awake. Because that was the moment I learned a truth that took me 7 decades to accept. Some people will call you strong as long as your strength serves them. The moment your strength serves you, they will call you cruel. Let them. A life is a meal you spend years preparing. You gather ingredients. You learn what burns and what holds. You stir, you taste, you adjust. And sometimes you realize the people you cooked for never loved the food. They loved the power of being fed. So you stop cooking for them. You set the table for those who show up with empty hands and grateful hearts. You leave your recipes to the ones who will honor them. You close the kitchen door on the ones who only come when they smell something they can take. These days, when the nurse asks if I want to join bingo, I sometimes say no and sit by my window instead. I watch cars come and go. I watch the dandelions bloom anyway. I press my palm to the glass and feel the faint coolness. A reminder that the world is still there, moving, indifferent, beautiful in small, stubborn ways. If you had asked younger Clara what justice looks like, she might have described a courtroom win, a public reckoning, applause, tears, a perfect ending tied with ribbon. But I've learned justice is often quieter. Justice is a woman keeping her receipts. Justice is a signature on a document that protects what she built. Justice is choosing where your love will live when you're gone. And if you're listening to me right now, wherever you are, at your own kitchen table, on a bus, in a room that smells like lavender and medication, maybe you know this taste too. That metallic warning. That moment when someone tries to rewrite your story without your consent. I can't change what anyone did to you. I can't reach back into the past and stop the toast from being raised, the words from being spoken, the betrayal from landing like a plate dropped on tile. But I can tell you what I learned, the hard way, the slow way, the grandmother way. You are not required to stay where you are disrespected. You are not required to finance your own erasure. You are not required to keep offering warmth to hands that slap it away. Love is sacred. Yes, but so is the person doing the loving. And sometimes the most faithful thing you can do is to stop praying over a door that has already been shut, and instead turn your face toward the light that's still available to you, however small, however late. In the end, what stays with you is not the sound of their applause or their cruelty. What stays with you is the quiet you build afterward, the clean room inside yourself where your name is spoken kindly again, the soft, steady breath of a life that belongs to you. And that is how I learned to be old without being erased. Not by shouting, not by begging, not by staying frozen in the moment they tried to make me a ghost, but by walking, slowly and surely, toward the people and places that still know how to say, "Come in, Clara, sit down, you're home."